Copper Ridge, Colorado, December 1883. The old man sits on the porch of the Harper Dalton Ranch watching December snow fall across the valley. 8 years have passed since that night, but Benjamin Harper remembers it like yesterday. The young teacher from Colorado Springs has come with her notebook and pencil, eager to capture history before it fades into legend. She asks him to begin at the beginning. Ben closes his eyes. When he opens them, he is 55 again, standing in a forge that smells of coal smoke and desperation, holding a letter that will change nothing because he has already decided to die. Let me tell you about the knock, about the sound that pulled me back from the edge, about how a 9-year-old girl saved a broken man by asking him to save her. But first, you need to understand who I was that night. Not the man sitting here now content and whole. The other man, the dead one who still walked. The forge glowed red in the gathering darkness. I stood before it, same as I had done for 2,847 days before this one. The rhythm of hammer on anvil had kept me alive when I wanted nothing more than to stop breathing. Strike, turn, strike again, heat the metal, shape it, cool it. Repeat until the day ends and you can drink enough whiskey to sleep without dreams. In my pocket, $12. Everything I owned in the world. On the workbench beside me, a letter from the bank. 3 days to pay $200 or lose the last house my wife had ever lived in. The last place my son's feet had touched the ground. I had already made my decision. Not with a gun, you understand. I was not brave enough for that. But winter in the Colorado mountains can be just as final and far less dramatic. I would let the bank take the house. Then I would walk into the high country with a bottle and let the cold do what my cowardice could not. 3 days, 72 hours. Then freedom. The coals settled with a soft hiss. Outside, snow had begun to fall. Not the gentle kind that drifts down like feathers, but the horizontal kind that comes with mountain wind, the kind that gets into your bones and never leaves. I had seen 20 Colorado winters. I knew what was coming. I picked up the hammer, set it down, picked it up again. 8 years of this. 8 years of existing without living. 8 years of breathing without purpose, surviving without reason, going through motions my body remembered even when my mind had forgotten why they mattered. The letter sat there with its clean-typed words and cold mathematics. $200. The bank manager had been apologetic about it, almost kind, which somehow made it worse. I had built half the buildings in Copper Ridge. I had shod every horse mended, every wagon wheel, forged every door hinge and gate latch for 20 miles in any direction. But a man who worked alone, who spoke to no one, who drank his dinner more often than he ate it, that kind of man did not inspire confidence in bankers. I lifted the hammer and brought it down on a horseshoe that did not need more shaping. Sparks flew up and died in the cold air. The sound of metal on metal rang out across the empty yard, across the snow-covered street, across the 8 years since I had felt anything at all. Let me tell you about those 8 years, about what happens when a man loses everything and discovers that losing everything does not kill you. That you can wake up every morning with a hole in your chest where your family used to be, and somehow your body refuses to stop. Refuses to quit, keeps pumping blood and drawing breath even when you beg it not to. It was December 18th, 1875. I remember because it was Daniel's birthday. He would have been 8. Martha had planned a party. She had been baking for days, filling the house with smells of sugar and vanilla and cinnamon. Our son loved cinnamon. I had been at the saloon. We had argued that morning, Martha and I. She wanted to move back east, closer to her family. Said Colorado was too hard, too isolated, too dangerous. I said no. Said a man does not quit just because things get difficult. Said I had built something here and I was not abandoning it. Those were the last words I spoke to my wife. Not I love you, not you are right. Just stubborn pride dressed up as masculine principle. I was 3 whiskeys deep when someone ran into the saloon shouting about fire. The Harper barn was burning. I laughed. I actually laughed. I said it could not be true. My barn was stone. Stone does not burn. Then someone said, not the barn, the stable. Your wife and boy are in there. 5 seconds. That is how long it took my whiskey-soaked brain to understand what those words meant. 5 seconds while I sat there, stupid and slow, trying to make sense of impossible information. Daniel died in those 5 seconds. Died because I was drunk. Died because I had argued with his mother that morning. Died because I valued my pride more than her wisdom. I ran. God, how I ran. But the smoke was too thick, the flames too hot, and I had been too drunk to think straight. I got Martha out, dragged her coughing and screaming into the yard. She fought me, clawed at my arms, begged me to get Daniel. I went back in, found him in the last stall, curled up small, the pony standing over him like a guardian. The boy was not moving. I picked him up, felt how light he was, how still. Carried him out through the flames with my shirt catching fire, my hands blistering, my lungs filling with smoke. Daniel never woke up. The smoke had taken him before the fire could. Martha lasted 3 more hours, long enough to hold her son one last time. Long enough to look at me with eyes that said everything she could not speak. Long enough to understand that I had failed them both, that my stubbornness and my drinking had killed our family as surely as if I had set the fire myself. Then she let go, just released her grip on life and followed our boy into whatever comes after. I buried them on the hill above town next to graves of settlers who died in the early days. Paid for a stone marker with words I could barely read through my tears. Martha Harper, beloved wife. Daniel Harper, beloved son. Gone too soon. Forever in our hearts. Then I went back to my forge and did not speak to another living soul for 3 months. The town tried at first. People brought meals. The reverend came to pray. The sheriff checked on me every few days. But I had nothing to say to any of them. I worked. I drank. I slept when exhaustion forced me to. And slowly, quietly, I died inside while my body kept moving through the motions of being alive. 2,847 days of waking up alone, eating alone, working alone, drinking alone, of hammer on anvil and the same 4 walls and the same empty bed, of existing without living, breathing, without feeling surviving, without any reason to survive. Until tonight. I set the hammer down and looked at the letter from the bank. $200 in 3 days. The house was probably worth $800 if I could find a buyer, but there was no time for that. I could sell my tools, my anvil, everything I own, but that would only bring $70 or $80. Not enough, so in 3 days I would lose the last piece of Martha that still existed in this world. The house we had built together. The home where Daniel had taken his first steps, spoken his first words, grown from baby to boy. It should have hurt more than it did, but after 8 years I had discovered that pain has a bottom. You can only hurt so much before you go numb, before you stop feeling anything at all. I was reaching for the whiskey bottle I kept under the workbench when I heard it. A knock so faint I almost missed it under the wind in the settling coals. 3 soft taps, barely there, like a bird hitting a window. I stopped, hand frozen, halfway to the bottle. Listened. The knock came again. Weaker this time. Desperate. Nobody came to my door. Not anymore. Not since the funeral. Not since the day the whole town watched me stand beside 3 graves and say nothing at all, because there were no words big enough for that kind of empty. I moved to the door, hand on the latch. Something in my chest tightened. Some instinct that had been dead for 8 years suddenly woke up and screamed that this moment mattered, that what lay on the other side of that door would change everything, that I needed to pay attention, because fate only knocks once, and I had already ignored it too many times. I opened the door. The girl collapsed across my threshold. She could not have been more than 9 years old. Her dress was torn at the shoulder-thin cotton that had no business being worn in December. Her hair hung in tangles across her face, dark with melted snow, and something that might have been blood. One hand clutched a piece of paper crumpled and wet. The other hand reached out, fingers splayed against the wooden floor, trying to hold herself up. She failed. I caught her before she hit the ground. She weighed almost nothing. I could feel every rib through the fabric of her dress, feel the way her whole body shook with cold, or fear, or both. I lifted her, carried her inside, kicked the door shut behind me with enough force to rattle the hinges. The forge light fell across her face, and I felt something I had not felt in 8 years. Rage. Her left eye was swollen nearly shut, the bruise spreading down her cheek in shades of purple and black that looked days old. Her lip had been split and was only half healed, crusted with dried blood. There were marks on her neck, faint but visible, the kind that came from hands squeezing too hard. When I laid her on the workbench and moved to examine her injuries, she flinched away from my hands with a sound that was not quite a scream, not quite a sob. The sound a wounded animal makes when it knows the next touch might be the one that kills it. Easy, I said. My voice came out rough from disuse, scraped raw like rusted metal. I am not going to hurt you. She did not believe me. Her good eye rolled white with terror, searching for an escape route that did not exist. Her hands came up small and pale and shaking, trying to protect her face. I took a step back, hands raised where she could see them. I had not touched another human being in 8 years, had not wanted to, had not thought I remembered how. Now I stood there in the forge light, with my hands up like a man surrendering, and something in my chest that I thought had died completely started to crack open. The girl stared at me, breathing fast and shallow. The kind of breathing that came before passing out or panicking. I knew both well enough. "What is your name?" I asked quietly. She tried to speak, choked on it. Her throat worked, struggling with words that would not come. I waited. I was good at waiting. 8 years of silence had taught me patience if nothing else. "Emma," she finally whispered. The word came out broken. Emma Dalton. Dalton, I knew that name. Everyone in Copper Ridge knew that name. Robert Dalton owned the biggest ranch in the valley. 5,000 acres of prime grazing land with water rights that made it worth 10 times that in drought-prone country. The Dalton Ranch sat 15 miles north of town, sprawling across the foothills, where the grass grew thick and the creek never ran dry. Robert had been a good man, fair, the kind of rancher who paid his debts on time and treated his hands with respect. I had shod his horses for years, mended his tools, repaired his wagon more times than I could count. Robert had been one of the few people who still spoke to me after the fire, who treated me like a man instead of a ghost. And Robert had stood up at my wedding 15 years back when I was young and stupid and thought I could build something that would last forever. "Where are your folks?" I asked, though part of me already knew the answer from the way Emma's face crumpled. "Dead," she said, flat, the way a child says a thing she has had to say too many times. No tears, no emotion, just fact. Wagon went off the road last September. Wheel came loose on Bridger's Pass. I felt something cold settle in my gut, something that had nothing to do with the winter wind leaking through the doorframe. Bridger's Pass was a straight run wide and well-maintained. Wheels did not come loose there. The road was solid, graded, smooth, traveled by freight wagons heavy enough to flatten any loose stone. If a wheel came off on Bridger's Pass, it was not an accident. "And your uncle?" I asked, though I already knew. There was only one uncle in the Dalton family. Emma's whole body went rigid. Every muscle locked tight. Her breathing stopped for 3 full seconds, then came back in short, panicked gasps. When she spoke, her voice had dropped to barely a whisper. "Uncle Victor. He says he is my guardian now. Says the ranch is his till I am grown." She looked up at me with that one good eye. Says I am never going to be grown enough. She turned slowly, painfully, like every movement cost her something. Showed me her back. I had worked with metal for 30 years. I knew what force looked like. I knew what happened when you struck steel too hard, when you applied pressure without care, when you shaped something through violence instead of skill. The dress had torn along the shoulders and down the spine. Through the gaps I could see welts, fresh ones still weeping clear fluid, where skin had split open. Old ones half healed and layered over each other like rings of a tree, telling the story of weeks or months of systematic brutality. They wrapped around her sides, across her shoulder blades, down to her lower back where the dress still covered. Some were thin lines. Others were thick as a man's finger, raised and angry. And stamped into the worst of them, clear as a brand burned into cattle, was the pattern of a silver belt buckle. 3 horses running manes flowing, captured in ornate detail. I had seen that buckle before. Victor Ashford wore it everywhere he went, showed it off like a trophy, like proof of his status. Custom made by a silversmith in Denver. Cost more than most men in Copper Ridge earned in a year. Sterling silver with gold inlay. Distinctive, unmistakable, unique. Evidence. My hands clenched into fists hard enough that my knuckles cracked. The rage that had flickered when I first saw her face now roared into something hot and bright and dangerous. For 8 years I had felt nothing. Now I felt everything at once, and it threatened to consume me. But rage would not help Emma. Rage would make me stupid. I had been stupid once before, and it had cost me everything. I made myself breathe, made myself think. Outside, the sound of hoofbeats crunched through frozen snow, two horses moving fast, coming closer. I moved to the window, looked out through the break in the shutters. Two riders emerged from the darkness in swirling snow. The first carried a lantern that swung wild in the wind, throwing shadows that danced across the white ground like demons. The second wore a star on his chest that caught the lamplight and threw it back. Sheriff Cole Mitchell on his bay gelding, the one with the white blaze down its face. And beside him, straight-backed and rigid on a black stallion that probably cost more than my entire forge, Victor Ashford. I had not seen Victor up close in years. The man kept to his big house on the east side of town, the one with the stone foundation and imported glass windows. He owned the bank, owned the lumber mill, owned half the businesses on Main Street and most of the politicians in the territory. His money came from cattle and land speculation and making deals that somehow always left him richer and everyone else scrambling. He was 48 years old but looked younger. Clean-shaven hair, pay-mated, and perfect even in a blizzard. Wore clothes that came from Denver or San Francisco, clothes that said money louder than words ever could. And at his waist, catching the lamplight, that silver buckle with its 3 running horses. I turned back to Emma. She had gone pale, every bit of color draining from her face. Her good eye fixed on the door like it might explode inward any second. Her hands gripped the edge of the workbench so hard her knuckles had gone white. "That him?" I asked quietly. "Your uncle." Emma nodded, could not seem to make her voice work. Just nodded again, faster, more desperate. "Does he know you are here?" "He saw me running. I tried to hide, but he saw." Her words came tumbling out now, fast and frightened. "He said if I ran, he would do worse than before. He said he would make me sorry I was ever born." I looked at her, 9 years old, beaten, terrified, alone. Then I looked at the door, at the 2 men outside who had come to take her back to more of the same. I thought about 3 graves on a hillside. I thought about the smell of smoke and the sound of my wife screaming and the feeling of my son's small body going still in my arms. I thought about 2,847 days of hammering metal because it was the only thing that did not require me to feel anything at all. I thought about the letter from the bank and the house I was going to lose in 3 days, and how none of that mattered if I let another child suffer when I could prevent it. Then I thought about Robert Dalton standing up at my wedding 15 years ago. Robert, who had been my friend. Robert, who had never stopped treating me like a man, even after the fire. Robert, who was dead now, under circumstances that sounded less like accident and more like murder with every passing second. I made my choice. I pulled my coat off the peg and shrugged into it. The weight of it settled across my shoulders, familiar and heavy. I checked that the door latch was secure, then stepped out onto the porch, pulling the door closed behind me, putting myself between Emma and whatever was coming next. The cold hit like a fist. The wind had picked up, driving snow horizontal across the yard, building drifts against the fence line that would be 3 feet deep by morning. I could barely see 10 feet in front of me, but I could hear them clearly enough. Horses snorting leather, creaking the jingle of bit and bridle. The 2 riders stopped 30 yards out, just at the edge of the forge light. Both dismounted. Sheriff Mitchell's movements were slow, reluctant. Victor's were quick and precise, every gesture calculated and controlled. Mitchell looked uncomfortable. His hand rested on his gun belt, but his eyes kept sliding away from my face, looking at the ground, the sky, anywhere else. He was a good man caught in a bad situation. I had known him for 15 years, had showed his horses, had stood beside him at town meetings back when I still attended such things. Mitchell tried to do right, but trying was not always enough. Victor Ashford looked like a man who had just won something. He strode forward through the snow, not hurrying but not hesitating then either. Confident, entitled, sure of his welcome because he had never been refused anything in his entire life. He wore a black wool coat that probably cost more than my entire forge, black leather gloves, a black hat with a silver band that matched the buckle at his waist. His boots were polished to a mirror shine despite the mud and snow. His face was composed, pleasant, even like he was out for an evening stroll and had just happened to stop by. Benjamin Harper Victor's voice cut through the wind, moved and controlled. The voice of a man used to boardrooms and negotiations and getting exactly what he wanted. "I believe you have something that belongs to me." I said nothing. Just stood there on the porch with my hands loose at my sides, watching, waiting. Victor stepped closer. I could smell his cologne, now expensive and sharp, out of place in the snow and forge smoke and mountain cold. The kind of scent that costs more per ounce than most families spent on food for a month. Now, Benjamin, I know we have had our differences in the past, but this is family business. The girl is troubled, headstrong like her mother was. Sometimes children need correction, structure, discipline. He paused, let that word hang in the air between us. Discipline, as if beating a 9-year-old bloody was some kind of pedagogical technique. I know you are going through difficult times, Victor continued. His tone shifted, became almost sympathetic. The bank matter, your debts. I can help with that, Benjamin. I truly can. $200 is nothing to me. I could make that disappear. And I need a good metal worker at the mill. $80 a month, steady work, no more scrambling for customers. He let that offer settle. $80 a month was more than I had made in the past year. It was security, stability, everything I had lost. All I am asking in return is that you let me take Sarah home. She is my responsibility, my blood. The law gives me that right as her uncle and guardian. You cannot keep her here. You are in no position to care for a child. The insult was delivered gently, wrapped in concern, but it landed all the same. He was right. I was a drunk. I was broken. I could barely take care of myself. Sheriff Mitchell stepped forward, looking sick but determined. Ben Mitchell said quietly, I do not want to do this, but the law is clear. Victor has guardianship papers signed by Judge Arthur Miller. Legal and proper. Filed with the territorial clerk 2 weeks after Robert and Catherine died. He pulled a folded document from his coat, held it out. I did not take it. Mitchell's jaw clenched. Those papers give Victor legal custody. If you do not surrender Emma and come peacefully, I have to use force. That is not a threat. That is my job. I looked at Mitchell, looked at the genuine conflict in his eyes. He did not want to be here any more than I wanted him here. But the law was the law, and men like Mitchell lived by law even when law was wrong. Then I looked at Victor, really looked at him, saw past the expensive clothes and polished manners to what lived underneath, saw the calculation in his eyes, the complete absence of anything resembling love or mercy or basic human decency. Saw a man who viewed a 9-year-old orphan as nothing more than an obstacle to be removed on his way to 5,000 acres of prime grazing land. Behind me through the closed door I heard it, Emma's voice. Barely a whisper, but clear enough in the moment of silence between wind gusts. Please do not make me go back. 4 words spoken by a 9-year-old girl with welts on her back and terror in her voice. I had spent 8 years not caring about anything, not feeling anything, not being responsible for anything except hammering metal and collecting payment and drinking enough to sleep without dreams. I had told myself I was done caring, done trying, done being responsible for anyone's life when I had failed so completely at protecting the ones that mattered most. But that voice, that small, broken, desperate voice asking me, please, something in my chest cracked wider, something that had been frozen solid for 2,847 days started to thaw. And it hurt worse than anything I had felt since the fire. Caring hurt. Responsibility hurt. Being needed hurt. But the alternative, sending that child back to the man who had beaten her bloody, that would hurt worse. No, I said. The word hung in the frozen air between us. Simple, final, absolute. Victor's smile vanished. All pretense of pleasantness dropped away like a mask falling, and what was left looked like something you would find under a rock. I am sorry, Victor said, each word clipped and precise. I believe I misheard you. No, I repeated. My voice came out steady now, stronger. She is not going anywhere with you tonight. You cannot keep her. Those papers are legal. I am her guardian under territorial law. Then get a judge to come tell me that. A real one, not one you bought 2 weeks after Robert died. Victor's face went white, then red. His hand moved toward his coat pocket. My hand moved toward my belt, toward the knife I kept there for cutting leather. Both men froze. Sheriff Mitchell stepped between us. Stop, Mitchell said quietly. Both of you, just stop. He looked at me. You are making this harder than it needs to be. Am I? The law is the law, Ben. Those papers give Victor guardianship. I do not like it any more than you do, but I cannot just ignore legal documents because we do not like the man holding them. I held Mitchell's eyes. Saw the conflict there. Saw the decent man trapped inside an impossible situation. The law says a man can beat a child bloody and call it discipline, I said. The law says a wheel just comes off a wagon on a straight maintained road and kills two good people. The law says convenient things for convenient people, Cole. Doesn't make them right. Mitchell's jaw clenched. He looked away, looked back. I will give you 10 days, he said finally. That is all I can do under the custody dispute provisions. 10 days to get a lawyer if you can afford one. 10 days to find some legal grounds to challenge the guardianship. But on day 11, Ben, if you still have that girl, I will have to come back here with deputies and arrest you for kidnapping and custodial interference. That is not a threat. That is a promise. That is my job. Victor wheeled on him. 10 days. You are giving him 10 days to harbor a runaway. What kind of law enforcement is that? The kind that follows territorial statute on temporary custody disputes, Mitchell said flatly. Section 42, paragraph 6. Either party can request a 10-day review period before enforcement of guardianship transfer. It is in the books. Look it up. He mounted his horse before Victor could argue further. Sat there looking down at me with something like regret in his eyes. I am sorry, Mitchell said. But that is all you get. After that, I have to do my duty. Victor stood there for a long moment, snow gathering on his shoulders, that silver buckle catching the lamplight and throwing it back in sharp reflections. When he spoke, his voice had gone cold and flat, all pretense of civility abandoned. You just made a very serious mistake, Harper. A costly one. In 10 days, I will have that girl back. And you will lose everything. Your forge, your house, your freedom. All because you could not mind your own business and let a man handle his family affairs. He walked back to his horse with the same careful, controlled movements, like even his anger was calculated and precise. Mounted up, gathered his reins, looked down at me one last time. Robert Dalton thought he could stand against me too, Victor said quietly. The words carried across the snow, soft and deadly. Thought he could refuse to sell his water rights. Thought he could file complaints about my business practices. Thought he was untouchable because he had friends in town. He paused. Let that sink in. Look where it got him. The implication hung in the air like poison. Then Victor Ashford turned his horse and rode off into the swirling snow, the lamplight swinging wild in his hand, the darkness swallowing him whole like he had never been there at all. I stood on the porch until I could no longer hear the hoofbeats, until the wind had covered their tracks, until my hands stopped shaking and my breathing came back to something approaching normal. The cold had worked its way through my coat, through my shirt, into my bones. My fingers were numb, my face felt frozen. But I was alive in a way I had not been alive for 8 years. Inside, Emma had not moved from the workbench where I had left her. She sat there with her small hands folded in her lap, looking smaller than any 9-year-old should ever have to look. Her good eye tracked me as I came through the door and shut it carefully behind me. You are really not going to give me back, she asked. Her voice shook. But he will take your house. He owns the bank. I know, he will put you in jail. Maybe he will hurt you. He hurts everyone who stands against him. I walked to the stove, poured water from the kettle into a tin basin, found the cleanest cloth I owned, which was not very clean. Came back to where Emma sat. Can I clean those cuts? I asked quietly. She stared at me for a long moment, searching my face for something. Whatever she found there must have been enough because she nodded. I worked in silence. I was not gentle because I did not know how to be gentle anymore. But I was careful. Washed away the dried blood from the welts on her back. Applied salve from a jar I kept for rope burns and forge injuries. The cuts were bad, worse than I had thought. Some of them had gone infected, angry red around the edges, weeping pus. She would need proper medical attention from the doctor, but that would have to wait until morning. Right now, this was the best I could do. Emma flinched every time I touched her, every single time, like her body expected pain from every human contact. But she did not pull away, did not run, just sat there trembling and letting me work. Why are you helping me? She asked finally. Her voice was small, uncertain, like she genuinely could not understand why anyone would choose this. I paused, cloth in hand. For the first time in 8 years, I let myself look directly at another human being. Really look. See them as a person instead of a transaction or a reminder of everything I had lost. because someone should have helped me once I said quietly. The words came out rough, scraped raw, and they didn't. And people died because of it. Emma's good eye filled with tears, not from pain, from something else. Something that looked like hope, which was somehow worse. Papa said you were the man who keeps promises, she whispered. He told me before he died, told me if anything ever happened, if Uncle Victor ever tried to take the ranch, I should find Benjamin Harper. She reached into her dress pocket with shaking fingers, pulled out the crumpled paper she had been clutching when she collapsed on my doorstep, smoothed it out on the workbench with careful movements. It was not a deed. It was a letter, written in a shaking hand, ink smudged in places, dated 3 weeks before Robert Dalton died. I took it, read it in the lamplight while my hands started shaking again for reasons that had nothing to do with cold. Ben, if you are reading this, I am already gone. I know we have not spoken much these past years since you lost Martha and young Daniel. I know you blame yourself for what happened. I know you have shut yourself away from everyone who cares about you. But I am writing to you now as a friend, as a man you once stood up for at his wedding, as someone who needs to ask the hardest thing I have ever asked anyone. Protect my Sarah. Victor has been coming around more lately. Questions about the ranch, about what would happen if Catherine and I both died, about whether we have a will, whether Sarah has any other family besides him. He thinks I do not notice, but I do. I notice everything where my daughter is concerned. He wants the water rights, Ben. The creek that runs through Section 12 never goes dry. Not in drought, not in winter, not ever. Every rancher within 50 miles would pay premium prices for access to that water. Victor knows it. He has been buying up the surrounding land for 2 years now. The Dalton Ranch is the last piece he needs to control the entire valley. And I will not sell. I told him no 6 months ago. Told him again 3 months ago. Last week he stopped asking and started making comments about accidents and how fragile life is and how quickly things can change. Catherine does not sleep anymore. She hears things at night, sees shadows where there should not be any. We are both scared, Ben, not for ourselves, for Sarah. If you are reading this, it means the thing we feared has happened. It means Victor found a way. And it means Sarah needs you now more than she has ever needed anyone. I know what you are thinking. You are thinking you are not the right man for this. You are thinking you failed your own family. So how could you possibly protect mine? You are thinking 8 years of grief and guilt and whiskey have left you broken beyond repair. Maybe they have. But Ben, you saved my life once. 10 years back. The mine collapsed at Silver Creek. Everyone else had given up on me. Said I was already dead. Said the shaft was too unstable to risk more lives. But you went in anyway. You found me under 2 tons of fallen timber. Carried me out on your back with your own ribs broken and blood running down your face. Carried me 5 miles to the doctor because your horse had bolted and mine was dead. You would not take payment, would not take thanks, just disappeared before I could even get your name from someone else in town. That is who you are, Ben, not the broken man drinking himself to death in a forge. The man who saves people even when he does not save himself. There is a baffling hidden in my saddle. The old one I keep in the barn, not the one I use for every day. It is tucked in the lining beneath the seat. Names you as Sarah's legal guardian if anything happens to Catherine and me. I had my lawyer draw it up proper. File it with the territorial clerk's office. It is legal and binding. Victor does not know about it. Nobody does except my lawyer, and he is sworn to secrecy. When the time comes, that will is your weapon. Use it. I am asking you to do the hardest thing a man can do. I am asking you to care again when caring costs you everything. I am asking you to protect a child who is not yours, to stand against a powerful man, to risk everything you have left for someone else's daughter. I am asking because you are the only man I trust, not because you are perfect, God knows you are not, but because you know what it means to lose everything and still choose to be good. Because when it mattered most, when everyone else walked away, you walked into a collapsing mine to save a man you barely knew. That is the kind of man I need for Sarah. Please, Ben, save her the way you saved me. Keep her safe until she is old enough to claim what is rightfully hers. Teach her to be strong. Teach her that some things are worth fighting for, even when the fight seems impossible. And maybe if God is merciful, saving her will save you too. Your friend Robert Dalton. Postscript. The lawyer's name is Henry Whitmore in Colorado Springs. He has a copy of the will and instructions to contact you if anything happens to us. If he does not contact you within a week of our deaths, assume Victor got to him. Trust no one else. I read the letter 3 times before I could make my voice work. My throat had closed up. My eyes burned. The paper shook in my hands. Your papa wrote this, I said. Emma nodded. 3 weeks before the wagon went off the road. He hid it in his coat pocket. Told me where to find it if anything happened. Told me to run to you if Uncle Victor ever tried to take me away. Told me you were the only one who could not be bought because you do not care about money anymore. She looked up at me with that one good eye bruised and swollen, but still seeing clearly. He said you were the man who keeps promises even when they hurt, especially when they hurt. I set the letter down carefully on the workbench. My chest felt tight like someone had wrapped iron bands around my ribs and was slowly, methodically tightening them. For 8 years, I had told myself I was done. Done caring, done trying, done being responsible for anyone's life when I had failed so spectacularly at protecting the ones who mattered most. Now here was a dead man's letter asking me to try again, asking me to be the person I had been before the fire, before the whiskey, before 2,847 days of existing without living. Sarah, I said. Not Emma. Your real name is Sarah, she nodded. Papa changed it in the will, so Uncle Victor would not find me as easily. I have been Emma for 4 months, but I am Sarah, Sarah Dalton. There is a will, I said, slowly trying to make sense of it, in your father's old saddle, in the barn at your ranch. I could not get to it, Sarah said. Her voice dropped to almost nothing. When Uncle Victor came after Mama and Papa died, he locked everything up. Said it was all his property now. Said I was not allowed in the barn or the house or anywhere without his permission. I tried to sneak in once. She touched her swollen eye gently. That is when he gave me this. Said if I tried again, he would do worse. I stood, walked to the window, looked out at the snow that was falling harder now, building up in thick drifts against the fence line covering the world in white, making everything clean and new on the surface while darkness lived underneath. 10 days. I had 10 days to get that will, 10 days to prove it was legitimate, 10 days to find a lawyer who would stand against Victor Ashford and his money and his power and his half-ownership of everyone who mattered in territorial government, 10 days to protect a girl I barely knew, to honor a promise from a dead man, to become someone other than the broken thing I had been for so long. It was impossible. But then again, so was carrying a man with a broken back 5 miles through mountain wilderness. So was building half a town with nothing but a forge and determination. So was surviving 8 years with a hole in your chest where your family used to be, and no good reason to keep breathing except that your body apparently did not care whether you wanted to or not. I turned back to Sarah. She was watching me with an intensity that made me uncomfortable, waiting, hoping, trusting in a way that absolutely terrified me, because what if I failed again? What if my drinking and my grief and my guilt made me too slow, too stupid, too broken to save her the way I'd been too broken to save my own family? I need you to understand something, I said. The words came hard, scraped raw from a place I had not accessed in years. I am not a good man, Sarah. I let my wife and son die because I was drunk and stupid and too slow to think clearly. I have spent 8 years doing nothing but trying to forget that I am still alive when they are not. I do not know how to take care of a child. I barely know how to take care of myself. I do not know how to fight men like your uncle who have money and lawyers and judges in their pockets. I do not even know if I can keep myself sober long enough to figure any of this out. I stopped, swallowed hard, made myself say the rest. I might fail you. I probably will fail you. And if I do, if something happens to you because I was not good enough or fast enough or smart enough, I will not survive it. I cannot lose someone else. I just cannot. Sarah slid off the workbench. Her bare feet made no sound on the wooden floor. She crossed the space between us slowly like she was approaching a wounded animal. Then she did something I had not expected. She reached out and took my hand. Her fingers were small and cold and trembling, but they held on. Wrapped around my scarred, calloused palm and squeezed with surprising strength. Papa knew all that Sarah said quietly. He knew you were broken. He knew you blamed yourself. He knew about the drinking and the loneliness and all of it. He still chose you. Why? Sarah looked up at me. Because you keep your promises even when they hurt, even when they cost you everything. You went into that mine when everyone else said it was suicide. You stayed after everyone else left. You saved him when saving him almost killed you. She squeezed my hand tighter. That is who you are, Mr. Harper. Not the man who could not save his family. The man who saves people anyway. I stared down at this 9-year-old child who had been beaten and orphaned and terrified and was somehow still standing here trying to convince me I was worth believing in. Something in my chest cracked all the way open. Something that had been frozen solid for 2,847 days split apart and started bleeding and hurting and feeling again. It was agony, and it was also somehow the first real thing I had felt since the fire. All right, I heard myself say. The words came from somewhere deep, somewhere I thought had died completely. We will get that will. We will stand against your uncle. We will fight this thing with everything we have. And maybe if we are lucky, and if God has not completely given up on me, we will win. I paused, made myself be honest. But Sarah, if we do this, you need to know the odds. Victor Ashford owns this town. He owns the bank, the lumber mill, half the businesses on Main Street. He probably owns Judge Miller, who signed those guardianship papers. He has money and connections, and the kind of power that crushes people who stand against him. The only thing I have is a forge and $12 and a letter from your dead father. And me, Sarah said. You have me. I looked at her. You are 9 years old. I am a witness. I can tell people what he did. Show them my back. Tell them about Mama and Papa's wagon and how the wheel could not have just come loose on that road. Her voice strengthened. I am not helpless, Mr. Harper. Papa taught me to ride and shoot and think. I can help. You are a child. Children should not have to fight. But sometimes they do. Sarah's jaw set in a way that reminded me painfully of Robert Dalton. Stubborn, determined, unwilling to back down even when backing down was the smart choice. Papa said you saved him because you could not walk away when someone needed help. Well, I need help. And you cannot walk away either. Not really. That is not who you are. She was right and we both knew it. Morning came gray and cold. I woke on the bench where I had finally dozed off around 3 in the morning, my back stiff, my neck aching, my mouth tasting like old metal. For a moment, I forgot where I was while I was sleeping in my workshop instead of the empty house up the hill. Then I heard movement from the back room and remembered everything. Sarah. The letter. 10 days. I stood slowly, my joints protesting. I was 55 years old and felt 70. The whiskey bottle sat on the workbench where I had left it the night before, still half full. I looked at it for a long moment, reached for it, stopped. Not today. Maybe not ever again if I wanted to keep the promise I had made to a dead man and a living child. I built up the fire in the stove instead, put water on to boil, found the last of my coffee, the good stuff I saved for special occasions, made it strong enough to strip paint. The smell filled the workshop warm and bitter and alive. The door to the back room opened. Sarah emerged, moving carefully like every step cost her something. She had slept in her dress because she had nothing else. Her hair was still tangled. Her face still bruised, but her eyes were clearer than they had been the night before. Morning, I said. Morning. Her voice came out scratchy. She looked at the coffee pot, then at me. Is that real coffee, real as it gets in Copper Ridge? Mama never let me have coffee, said it would stunt my growth. I poured 2 cups, handed her one. Your mama was probably right, but I figure after last night you have earned it. Sarah took the cup in both hands, sipped, carefully made a face. It is bitter, life generally is. She looked at me over the rim of the cup. Something like a smile tried to form on her battered face but did not quite make it. Papa used to say things like that. She said softly. We drank in silence for a few minutes. Outside, the snow had stopped, but the sky stayed gray and heavy, promising more to come. I could see drifts piled 3 feet high against the fence line covering the yard in white that looked clean and peaceful if you did not know what lived underneath. We need to get you some proper clothes, I said finally, and food. And I need to take you to the doctor to look at those cuts. Sarah stiffened. Dr. Pierce will tell Uncle Victor. Dr. Pierce will keep his mouth shut if I ask him to. We served together in the war. He owes me. Everyone owes Uncle Victor more. Not everyone. Not yet. There was a knock at the door. Sarah went pale, her cup clattered onto the workbench, coffee splashing. She backed toward the wall, eyes wide, breathing fast. Easy, I said quietly. Stay here. I moved to the door, hand on the latch. Through the gap in the shutters, I could see a single figure, smaller than Victor, wearing a long coat and carrying a black medical bag. Dr. Nathan Pierce. I opened the door. The doctor stepped inside, quickly shaking snow from his coat. He was 62, gray-haired and gray-bearded, with the kind of face that had seen too much suffering to be surprised by anything anymore. He had been a surgeon in the war, same unit as me, had cut off more limbs than he could count, and saved more lives than anyone had a right to expect. He took one look at Sarah and his jaw tightened. Sheriff Mitchell came by my house this morning, Pierce said. Told me you had Robert Dalton's girl here. Told me she might need medical attention. He set his bag on the workbench, opened it. He also told me not to tell anyone else. Said it was important. His exact words were, that girl deserves better than Victor Ashford. Do what you can. Pierce pulled out bandages, antiseptic, clean cloth. So let us see what we are dealing with. Sarah looked at me. I nodded. She turned slowly, showing her back. Dr. Pierce had seen everything in 30 years of frontier medicine. Gunshot wounds, knife fights, childbirth gone wrong, diseases that ate people from the inside out. But when he saw the welts on Sarah's back, something in his face went hard and cold. How long? He asked quietly. 4 months, Sarah whispered. Since Mama and Papa died. Pierce examined her carefully, professionally, his hands gentle despite their size. He cleaned the infected cuts with antiseptic that made Sarah hiss in pain, applied fresh bandages, checked her ribs, her face, her hands. No broken bones, he said finally. But these welts are bad. Some are infected. She needs proper care. Warm baths with salt. Clean bandages changed daily. And she needs to eat. She is malnourished. I will make sure she eats. Pierce looked at me. Really looked at me the way only an old friend could. You know what you are doing here? Standing against Victor Ashford with nothing but good intentions and a letter from a dead man. No, I said honestly. But I am doing it anyway. You will lose your forge, your house probably, your freedom. Probably. And you are doing it for a child you barely know. I am doing it because someone should have stood up for my family and they did not. I am doing it because Robert Dalton asked me to. And I am doing it because if I do not, I will not be able to look at myself in a mirror ever again. Pierce was quiet for a long moment. Then he closed his medical bag and turned to Sarah. Young lady, I want you to know something. Your father was a good man, one of the best I ever knew. And he chose Ben Harper to protect you for a reason. Ben here might not look like much right now. Might have spent the last 8 years drowning in a bottle. But before that, he was the kind of man who walked into hell to save people. Still is, apparently. You listen to him. Trust him. He will keep you safe or die trying. Sarah nodded silently. Pierce turned back to me. I will do what I can quietly. But you need to know something. Victor is already working the town, telling people you are dangerous, unstable, spreading stories about the fire, about how you were drunk when Martha and Daniel died, making people afraid of you. Let him talk. It is more than talk, Ben. He has money, power. He is making promises and calling in debts. By tomorrow, half the town will believe you are a threat to that girl, not a protector. I felt something cold settle in my gut. How bad? Bad enough that I heard talk at the saloon last night. Talk about men riding out here, making sure you did the right thing and gave Sarah back to her legal guardian. A mob, not yet, but heading that way if Victor keeps pushing. I walked to the window, looked out at the empty street, the snow-covered buildings, the town I had helped build with my own hands. A town that would turn on me if Victor Ashford wanted it badly enough. How much time do I have? 2 days, maybe 3. Pierce put his hand on my shoulder. You need to move fast. Get that will. Find a lawyer. Make this legal before Victor makes it violent. After Pierce left, I stood at the workbench and made myself think. Really think the way I had not done in 8 years. pushing through the fog of grief and whiskey and isolation to find the man I used to be, the man who planned and strategized and solved problems instead of drowning them. Sarah sat on the bench watching me waiting. "The will is in your father's saddle," I said slowly. "In the barn at the Dalton Ranch. Uncle Victor has guards there now, 2 men. They are there all the time." "When do they change shifts?" Sarah thought about it. "Sunset. They trade off. One stays, one goes to town for dinner. For about an hour there is only one man and the barn." "Where exactly is the saddle tack room?" "Third hook from the door. It is old brown leather worn on the seat. Papa kept it because it was the first one he ever owned." I nodded, started forming a plan. It was risky, possibly stupid, but it was all I had. "We will go tonight," I said. "During the shift change. One guard is better odds than two. You will get caught. Maybe. But sitting here doing nothing guarantees we lose. At least this way we are fighting." Sarah stood, walked to the forge, ran her hand over the anvil, the tools, the horseshoe I had been working on when she knocked on my door. "Papa used to bring me here sometimes," she said. "When you were shoeing his horses, I was maybe 5 or 6. You probably do not remember. I did remember. A little girl with dark hair and curious eyes asking questions about everything, touching things she should not touch, until Robert gently pulled her away. "You asked me why metal got hot when you hit it," I said quietly. Sarah looked up surprised. "You remember that I told you it was magic, and you said magic was not real." She smiled slightly, the first real smile I had seen on her face. Papa laughed, said I had met my match. The memory hurt worse than I expected. Robert laughing, Sarah safe and happy, a world where children asked innocent questions and got playful answers, and nobody beat them bloody for existing. "I am going to get you back to that," I said. "To being a child who asked questions instead of flinching at shadows. I promise you that. You cannot promise that. Watch me." We spent the day preparing. I went through my tools, selected what I might need. A small pry bar for locks, wire cutters, a dark coat that would blend with night. I counted my money again. $12. Not enough for a lawyer, not enough for anything except maybe one more week of food. The letter from the bank still sat on the workbench. $200. 2 days left now. I looked at it and felt nothing. The house did not matter anymore. Nothing mattered except keeping Sarah safe and honoring Robert Dalton's trust. Around noon there was another knock. This time it was Margaret Torres, the woman who owned the boarding house on Main Street. She was 30 years old, strong and practical, with the kind of face that had seen hardship and come through it harder. She carried a basket covered with a cloth. "Dr. Pierce said you had a girl here who needed feeding," Margaret said without preamble. She did not wait for an invitation, just walked in and set the basket on the workbench. I brought food. Real food. Not whatever bachelor nonsense you are living on. The basket held bread, still warm, cheese, dried apples, jerky, a jar of preserves. More food than I had seen in my kitchen in months, or stared at it like it might disappear. "Thank you," I said. "Do not thank me yet. This is just food." Margaret looked at Sarah, her eyes softening. "Child, I knew your mama. She was a good woman. Came to town every month. Always had a kind word. Always paid her debts. You look just like her." Sarah's eyes filled with tears. Margaret knelt down. "I also know what Victor Ashford is. A snake in a nice suit. And I know what it takes for Ben Harper to care about anything after 8 years of not caring about himself. So here is what is going to happen. You need clothes, you come to me. You need a safe place, you come to me. You need anything at all, you come to me. Understand?" Sarah nodded. Margaret stood turned to me. "I heard the talk about men coming out here. About Victor spreading poison through town. You need to know you are not alone in this. There are people who remember Robert Dalton, remember what he stood for. They might not stand up publicly, not against Victor's money, but they will help quietly." "Why are you helping?" I asked. Margaret's face hardened. "Because 5 years ago, Victor tried to buy my boarding house. When I would not sell, my husband had an accident. Fell off a roof he had climbed 100 times before. Broke his neck." She paused. "Sheriff ruled it accidental. But I found boot prints on that roof that did not match my husband's boots. And I saw Victor Ashford at the funeral looking satisfied. The pieces were coming together. A pattern of death and accidents, and Victor Ashford benefiting every time. How many others, I asked quietly. That I know of, 3 families lost land after convenient accidents in the last 5 years. Robert and Catherine Dalton make 5. Probably more I do not know about. Margaret looked at me steadily. You are standing against something bigger than one bad man, Ben. You are standing against a system that protects money and power and lets men like Victor destroy anyone in their way. After Margaret left, I made Sarah eat. She picked at the food at first, then hunger took over, and she ate properly, tearing into the bread and cheese like she had not had a real meal in weeks, which she probably had not. While she ate, I went to the house for the first time in days. The empty rooms echoed. Dust covered everything. I found clothes that had belonged to Martha, altered them roughly with a knife and thread to fit Sarah's smaller frame. Found my old gun belt, the one from the war. Checked that the revolver still worked. Found ammunition. Counted rounds. 6 bullets. I hoped that would be enough. Hoped I would not need any. Back at the forge, Sarah had finished eating and fallen asleep on the bench, exhausted from fear and pain, in the simple act of feeling safe enough to close her eyes. I covered her with my coat, watched her sleep for a moment, felt the weight of responsibility settle heavier on my shoulders. Then I sat down with Robert's letter and read it again, looking for details I might have missed, looking for anything that might help. The lawyer, Henry Whitmore in Colorado Springs. Robert had mentioned him, said he had a copy of the will and instructions to contact me if anything happened, but it had been 4 months since Robert and Catherine died. If Whitmore had tried to contact me, the letter had never arrived, which meant Victor had intercepted it, or paid someone to intercept it, or killed Whitmore before he could send it. I needed that will. It was the only legal weapon I had. Without it, Victor's guardianship papers would stand, and Sarah would go back to being beaten until she either died or aged enough to sign over the ranch permanently. The sun was setting when Sarah woke. I had been sharpening my knife, testing the edge against my thumb. She watched me for a moment before speaking. You are really going tonight. We are going tonight, I corrected. I need you to show me exactly where the saddle is, exactly where the guards stand. Everything you remember. It is too dangerous. Everything worth doing is. We left an hour after full dark. The moon was hidden behind clouds, which was good. Less light meant less chance of being seen. I wore my darkest clothes. Sarah wore the altered dress from Martha, dark blue, that blended with night. We moved on foot, leading my horse rather than riding it. Quieter that way, less visible. The Dalton Ranch lay 15 miles north. We covered the distance in 4 hours, moving carefully, avoiding the main road. My legs ached. My breath came hard in the cold. I was not the man I had been 8 years ago, but I was still capable, still strong enough for this. We stopped a quarter mile from the ranch house, crouched behind a stand of trees. From here, I could see lights in the windows, could see the barn dark and silent against the snow, could see one figure standing near the barn door smoking a cigarette. The glow of it marked his position clearly. That is Stephen, Sarah whispered. He is mean, but he is lazy. He will stay by the door where it is warmer. Will not patrol, and the other guard should be gone by now. He always leaves right at sunset, goes to the saloon in town, comes back around midnight. I checked the time on my pocket watch. 10:30. We had 90 minutes before the second guard returned. You stay here, I said. If anything goes wrong, you run. Do not wait for me. Just run. No. Sarah, this is not negotiable. You need me. I know where the saddle is. I know where Uncle Victor keeps the keys. You will waste time searching. We do not have time to waste. She was right, and I hated it, but she was right. Stay close to me, I said. Stay quiet. If I tell you to run, you run. No arguments. We moved through the darkness like ghosts, circled wide around the barn, approaching from the back, where Stephen could not see us. The barn had a rear door, smaller, used for moving hay. I tested it carefully. Locked. I pulled out the pry bar, worked it into the gap between door and frame, and applied pressure slowly, carefully, trying not to make noise. The wood creaked. The lock held. I pushed harder. The lock broke with a sound like a gunshot. I froze. Sarah pressed against the wall, barely breathing. We waited, listening. Footsteps. Coming around the barn, Stephen investigating the noise. I pulled Sarah inside the barn into darkness that smelled of hay and horses and leather. Found a stall, pulled her down behind the wooden slats, Put my hand over her mouth, signaling silence. Stephen came through the rear door, lantern held high. The light swept across the barn interior, throwing wild shadows. I could see him clearly now. Young, maybe 25. Wore a gun belt low on his hip like he thought it made him dangerous. Probably did not know how to use it properly. The light passed over our hiding spot, moved on. Stephen muttered something under his breath about wind and broken latches. Started to turn away. Sarah's foot knocked against the bucket. The sound echoed through the barn like thunder. Stephen spun, hand going to his gun. Who was there? I moved before I could think about it. Rose from behind the stall, crossed the distance in 4 long strides. Hit Stephen hard in the jaw before the young man could draw his weapon. Stephen went down like a sack of grain, lantern flying from his hand, oil spilling across the floor. I caught the lantern before it could ignite the spilled oil, set it down carefully. Checked Stephen, unconscious but breathing. He would have a hell of a headache when he woke up, but nothing permanent. Help me tie him, I said. We used rope from the tack room, bound Stephen hand and foot, gagged him with his own bandana, dragged him into an empty stall, covered him with hay. By the time he woke up or the other guard found him, Sarah and I would be long gone. Sarah led me to the tack room. Third hook from the door, just like she had said. The saddle hung there, old and worn leather, cracked with age and use. I lifted it down carefully, ran my hands over the underside of the seat, feeling for the hidden compartment Robert had mentioned. There, a seam in the leather barely visible. I worked my knife blade into it. The stitching gave way. Inside, tucked into the lining, was a folded document. I pulled it out with shaking hands, unfolded it carefully in the lamplight. Last will and testament of Robert Edward Dalton. The words were formal, legal, written in a lawyer's precise hand. I scanned them quickly. Their Section 4 guardianship of minor child. In the event of our deaths, my wife Catherine and I hereby appoint Benjamin Samuel Harper of Copper Ridge, Colorado Territory as legal guardian of our daughter Sarah Elizabeth Dalton. We make this appointment trusting in Mr. Harper's character integrity and demonstrated capacity for courage under extreme circumstances. We further direct that all property assets and water rights associated with the Dalton Ranch be held in trust for Sarah until she reaches the age of majority at 18 years, with Benjamin Harper serving as executor and administrator of said trust. Dated April 12, 1883. Witnessed and notarized by Henry Whitmore, attorney at law, Colorado Springs. Filed with the Territorial Clerk's Office, May 1, 1883. I read it twice to make sure I understood. This was real, legal, filed properly. It predated Victor's guardianship petition by 5 months, which meant Victor's claim was invalid, meaningless, if we could prove this will was legitimate. Did you find it? Sarah whispered. I looked at her, saw hope and fear warring in her eyes. Yes. Does it say what Papa told me? It says I am your guardian. It says the ranch is yours. It says Victor has no claim to any of it. Sarah reached into the tack room, pulled out a small leather-bound book no bigger than her hand. The cover was worn, stained with what might have been water or blood. There is more, she said quietly. I took this from Papa's desk the night I ran. Did not know what it was until later. I took the book, carefully opened it to the first page. Robert Dalton's handwriting, neat and methodical. April 1881. Victor asked about water rights again today. 3rd time this month. Offered $2,000. When I refused, he said I was being short-sighted. Said men who do not see opportunity often find tragedy instead. I flipped through the pages. Entry after entry, dated, detailed. Names of other ranchers. Conversations. Threats dressed up as friendly advice. September 1882. Harrison Ranch burned last night. Sheriff says accidental. I examined the site this morning, found 3 separate points of origin. Fire does not start in 3 places by accident. Victor bought the land at auction today, paid half what it is worth. Harrison's widow had no choice but to sell. January 1883. Brake line on McCready's wagon was cut clean. Saw the tool marks myself before sheriff took the evidence. Same threading pattern as surveyor's pliers. Victor owns the only set in the territory. McCready's son sold the ranch 2 weeks later to Victor for water rights. The last entry was dated 3 days before Robert died. September 18th, 1883. Victor came to the house today. Did not bother with pleasantries. Said I had one last chance to sell. Said if I did not, he would make sure Sarah was well cared for after. The way he said after made my blood run cold. I told Catherine tonight if anything happens to me, it is not an accident. I have written everything down. Every threat, every suspicious death, every pattern I can see. Benjamin Harper is the only man I trust with this. God forgive me for putting this burden on him. The journal shook in my hands. This was not just a will. This was evidence. Documented proof spanning 2 years of threats of pattern of premeditated murder. Does it help? Sarah asked quietly. I looked at her, at this child whose father had spent his last months documenting his own death because he knew it was coming and wanted justice for his daughter. Yes, I said. My voice came out rough. It helps more than you know. Sarah's face crumpled. She started crying not from sadness, but from relief so powerful it overwhelmed her. I knelt down, let her collapse against me, held her while she sobbed into my coat, shook with 4 months' worth of terror, finally breaking loose. We are going to be okay, I said quietly. We have what we need. Outside, horse hooves crunched through snow. The second guard back early. I moved fast, pulled Sarah to her feet. Back door. Now. We ran through the barn, me clutching the will in one hand and Sarah's arm in the other, hit the rear door, at full speed, burst out into the night air. Behind us, voices shouting, "Stop thief, someone is in the barn." Gunshots. 2 of them. Close enough that I heard the bullets whine past. We reached the trees where I had left my horse. I lifted Sarah into the saddle, swung up behind her, kicked the horse into a gallop, without waiting to see if anyone was following. We rode hard for an hour, then another. The horse was blowing hard, foaming at the mouth, but I did not slow down until we were back in Copper Ridge, back at the forge, back behind a locked door with the will safe in my coat pocket. Sarah slid off the horse and collapsed onto the bench. My hands were shaking so hard I could barely unsaddle the horse. Adrenaline and fear, and the simple fact that I had not done anything like that in 8 years. We did it, Sarah said, wonder in her voice. We actually did it. We got the will, I agreed. Now we have to make sure it holds up. I pulled out the document again, studied it in the lamplight. The signatures looked real. The notary's seal looked official. But Victor had money. Money bought lawyers who could challenge anything. Money bought judges who would rule however they were told to rule. I needed help. Real help from someone who understood territorial law and could not be bought. There was a knock at the door. My hand went to my gun. Sarah pressed against the wall. Benjamin Harper. The voice from outside was cultured, educated, unfamiliar. My name is Henry Whitmore. I am an attorney from Colorado Springs. I believe we need to talk about Robert Dalton's will. I opened the door slowly, gun in hand. The man outside was 60 years old, gray-haired, wearing a suit that had seen better days but was still respectable. He carried a leather satchel and wore spectacles that caught the lamplight. His face was lined with age and what looked like genuine concern. "How do I know you are who you say you are?" I asked. "You do not. But I can tell you that Robert Dalton came to my office 2 years ago with a very specific request. He wanted to create a will that would protect his daughter from his brother Victor if anything happened to him and his wife. He was very clear that the will should be filed quietly, secretly, so Victor would not know about it until after Robert's death." Whitmore paused. "He also told me about a man named Benjamin Harper who once carried him 5 miles out of a collapsed mine. Said that man was the only person he trusted with his daughter's life." I lowered the gun slightly. "Why did you not contact me when Robert died?" "I tried. I sent 3 letters. None were answered. Then I received a visit from 2 men who made it very clear that if I pursued the matter further, I would have an accident similar to the one that killed the Daltons." Whitmore's jaw tightened. I am ashamed to say I was frightened enough to back down. For 4 months, I told myself it was the smart thing to do, the safe thing. Then tonight, I heard that you had taken Sarah in, that you were standing against Victor Ashford with nothing but courage and a dead man's trust. And I realized I was a coward. He looked at me steadily. "So I am here now, late but here. And I am offering my services as an attorney free of charge to make sure Robert Dalton's will stands up in court and Sarah Dalton gets what is rightfully hers." I studied him, looked for deception, found only tired honesty and what might have been redemption. "All right," I said, "come in." We sat at the workbench, the 3 of us. Whitmore examined the will, carefully nodded slowly. "This is solid. Properly executed, filed correctly, it supersedes any guardianship petition Victor made after Robert's death. He looked at me. But we have a problem. Victor has Judge Miller in his pocket. If we go through normal channels, Miller will find some technicality to invalidate this will. We need to go higher. We need to petition the territorial governor. How long does that take? Normally 2 months. But there is an emergency provision for cases involving child welfare. If we can prove imminent danger, we can get a ruling in days instead of months. Sarah's back is proof enough, I said grimly. Whitmore pulled out paper and pen. Then we start writing tonight. I will draft the petition. You will both need to give statements. We will need Dr. Pierce's medical report. We will need to file in Colorado Springs by tomorrow night. Tomorrow night is impossible. That is 80 miles. It is possible if we ride through the night. I brought 2 horses. We leave at dawn. Ride hard. File before the clerk's office closes. Whitmore looked at me seriously. This is our one chance, Ben. Victor will move to stop us once he realizes what we are doing. We have maybe 24 hours before he brings everything down on our heads. I looked at Sarah. She looked back at me with absolute trust. Then we had better start writing, I said. We worked through the night. Whitmore drafted legal documents in precise language. Sarah and I gave our statements recounting everything. The beating, the threats, the suspicious wagon accident, the pattern of deaths. Dr. Pierce arrived around midnight with his medical report detailed and damning. By dawn, we had a case. A real case solid enough to stand up in territorial court if we could just get it filed before Victor shut us down. I saddled my horse. Whitmore mounted his. Sarah stood in the doorway of the forge looking small and afraid. You will be safe here, I said. Margaret is coming to stay with you. Do not answer the door for anyone else. What if Uncle Victor comes? Then Margaret has a shotgun and permission to use it. I wanted to say more, wanted to promise her that everything would be okay, that I would come back, that we would win this. But I had learned not to make promises I might not be able to keep. Instead, I just put my hand on her shoulder. Trust me, I do, Sarah said quietly. Whitmore and I rode out as the sun was rising, 80 miles to Colorado Springs, 16 hours if we rode hard and the weather held. My back already ached. My legs protested. I was too old for this. But I rode anyway. Behind us, Copper Ridge was waking up. People emerging from houses, shops opening. Life going on like always. None of them knowing that in a forge at the edge of town, a 9-year-old girl was waiting to see if the legal system would protect her or feed her back to the man who beat her bloody. I kicked my horse into a faster pace. We had 24 hours. The race had begun. The ride to Colorado Springs was every bit as brutal as I expected. 80 miles through mountain passes still thick with snow, through valleys where the wind cut like knives, through darkness so complete we had to trust the horses to find the trail. My back screamed, my hands went numb on the reins, my lungs burned with cold air, but we rode. Around midnight, we stopped to rest the horses for 1 hour, built a small fire in the shelter of some rocks, ate jerky that tasted like leather, drank coffee that had gone cold in our canteens. Tell me about the mine collapse, Whitmore said. His voice was quiet, almost hesitant. The one where you saved Robert Dalton. I stared into the fire. I had not talked about that day in 10 years. Had tried not to think about it. But now in the darkness with exhaustion, making me honest, the words came. Silver Creek Mine, August 1873. I was working as a foreman there before I started the forge. Robert was one of the miners, new to the territory, did not know the mountain yet. There was a collapse in shaft 3. Support beams gave way, 12 men trapped. I paused, remembered. The owner said it was too dangerous to go back in, said we had already lost 12 men and he would not lose more, said we should seal the shaft and move on. But I could hear them down there, could hear them screaming. So you went in, I went in, against orders, against common sense. Found Robert under 2 tons of timber, both legs broken, bleeding from his head. He was conscious. Kept saying he did not want to die in the dark. Kept asking me to tell his wife, Catherine, that he loved her. My hands clenched. It took 3 hours to dig him out. 3 hours with the shaft groaning and settling around us, knowing any second the whole thing could come down and bury us both. But I got him out, carried him on my back 5 miles because the horses had bolted, and the owner sure as hell was not sending a wagon for a man who defied his orders. Robert lived. I got fired. Seemed like a fair trade at the time. Whitmore was quiet for a long moment. That is why he trusted you with Sarah. Not because you are perfect. Because when it mattered, you chose to walk into hell rather than leave a man behind. I looked at him. And what about you? Robert trusted you with his will. You disappeared for 4 months when Victor's men threatened you. Why come back now? Whitmore's face tightened. Because I have spent those 4 months watching that little girl suffer and telling myself I had good reasons for staying quiet. Telling myself I was being smart, practical, safe. He threw a stick into the fire. Then I heard you had taken her in. Heard you were standing against Victor with nothing but a forge and $12. And I realized you were doing what I should have done from the start. So here I am. Late. Ashamed. But here. Late is better than never. Is it Robert Dalton has been dead for 4 months? Sarah has been beaten for 4 months. How many more days would I have waited if you had not forced my hand? I had no answer to that. Just watched the fire burn and tried not to think about what was happening back in Copper Ridge. About Sarah alone in the forge with Margaret. About whether Victor had figured out what we were doing yet. About what he would do when he did. We rode out again before dawn, reached Colorado Springs as the sun was setting. 18 hours after we had left Copper Ridge. The horses were exhausted. I was barely conscious in the saddle. But we had made it. The territorial clerk's office was closing. Whitmore pounded on the door until a harried-looking clerk opened it, already saying, "They were closed. Come back tomorrow." "This is an emergency petition regarding child welfare," Whitmore said. His voice had gone hard, authoritative. The voice of a man who knew the law and how to wield it. Under Territorial Statute Section 17, you are required to accept emergency filings until 6 o'clock. It is 5:45. You have 15 minutes. The clerk looked at his watch, looked at my exhausted face, saw whatever it was that made him step aside. 15 minutes, that is all you get. Whitmore filed everything, the will, the medical reports, the statements, the petition for emergency review. The clerk stamped each document, filed them properly, gave Whitmore receipts proving everything had been submitted legally and on time. "When will we hear back?" Whitmore asked. "Emergency petitions get reviewed within 72 hours. You will receive notification by telegraph." 3 days, I said once we were outside. "We have to hold Sarah safe for 3 more days. 7 days left on Sheriff Mitchell's deadline," Whitmore said. "If the ruling comes through in time, you are legal. If it does not, Victor can have you arrested for kidnapping." We found a boarding house, paid for 2 rooms with the last of my money. I collapsed onto the bed without even removing my boots. Slept for 12 hours straight, dreamless and exhausted. When I woke, there was a telegram under my door. I opened it with shaking hands. "Victor knows, came to forge with 15 men and Judge Miller," demanded Emma. "Margaret held them with shotgun but cannot hold long. Sheriff Mitchell trying, but Miller has arrest warrant for Ben for kidnapping. Hurry. Dr. Pierce." Victor had not just acted, he had brought the judge and made it official. Whitmore tried to argue. Wait for the ruling. Going back now might be walking into a trap. I did not care. Sarah was in danger. That was all that mattered. I was on my horse within 15 minutes. Whitmore stayed behind to wait for the ruling, ready to ride the moment it came through. The journey back took 16 hours. I pushed my horse harder than was safe. The animal was loyal and strong and gave everything it had. By the time I reached Copper Ridge, it was barely standing. I left it at the livery with orders to give it the best care available. Paid with my pocket watch, the only thing of value I had left. Then I walked to the forge through streets that felt hostile in ways they never had before. People watched me pass, some with sympathy, most with suspicion. Victor had done his work well. The forge was intact. Margaret sat on the porch with a shotgun across her lap, looking tired but determined. Sarah was inside, visible through the window, pacing like a caged animal. "About time," Margaret said. "That man has been here twice. Brought more men each time. Keeps saying he is going to have the sheriff remove Sarah by force if you do not bring her out voluntarily." I walked inside. Sarah ran to me, threw her arms around my waist, held on like she was drowning. "I thought you were not coming back," she whispered. "I promised I would. People break promises. I do not." But Victor Ashford was done waiting. The mob came at sunset. I saw them from the window. 20 men, maybe more, carrying torches and rifles, led by Victor Ashford in his black coat, that silver buckle catching the firelight and throwing it back in sharp reflections. Behind him, Sheriff Mitchell looking sick but present. Behind them, half the town drawn by anger or fear or simple curiosity about what would happen next. I checked my revolver. 6 bullets. Not nearly enough if this went bad. Stay in the back room, I told Sarah. No matter what happens, you stay there. Understand? There are too many of them. I know. I looked at Margaret. Get her out if I cannot. Margaret nodded grimly, chambered around in her shotgun. I stepped onto the porch. The crowd stopped 30 feet away, torches throwing wild shadows across the snow. Victor stood at the front, surrounded by his hired men. Sheriff Mitchell stood to one side, hand on his gun, face troubled. Benjamin Harper. Victor called out. His voice carried across the yard, confident and controlled. Your time is up. The law says that girl belongs to me. Sheriff Mitchell here has a warrant for your arrest if you do not surrender her immediately. I said nothing, just stood there with my hands loose at my sides. Victor smiled. You have made quite a spectacle of yourself. Kidnapping a child, assaulting my employee, stealing documents from my property, breaking and entering. The charges are serious, Ben. You are looking at 5 years in territorial prison. Maybe more. She is not your property, I said quietly. She is a human being, and she is not going back to being beaten. I have legal guardianship, signed by a judge. That makes hers my responsibility. You have fraudulent papers signed by a corrupt judge. I pulled the will from my coat, held it up where everyone could see. This is Robert Dalton's real will, filed legally, dated 5 months before your guardianship petition. It names me as Sarah's guardian. It puts the ranch in trust for her. Your claim is void, the crowd murmured. Victor's smile flickered. That is a forgery, Victor said. Obviously forged by you or by some desperate lawyer you convinced to help you. It is filed with the territorial clerk, notarized properly, every signature verified. We have petitioned the governor for emergency review. You will have your answer in 2 days. 2 days, Victor laughed. It was not a pleasant sound. Sheriff Mitchell's deadline was 10 days. That ended yesterday. As of this moment, you are in violation of a court order. You are a criminal. Sheriff, arrest this man. Mitchell stepped forward reluctantly. Ben, I do not want to do this, but the law is clear. Your 10 days are up. If you do not surrender Sarah and come peacefully, I have to use force. The will changes things, Cole. Does it? Victor is right. Could be a forgery, could be real, but it takes a judge to determine that. And Judge Miller has already ruled in Victor's favor. Until a higher authority overturns that ruling, I have to enforce the existing order. Mitchell's hand moved to his gun. I am sorry. I looked at the crowd, saw men I had known for 15 years. Men whose horses I had shod, whose tools I had mended, whose children had played in this very yard back when Daniel was alive. Now they stood there with torches and rifles ready to take a 9-year-old girl back to the man who beat her bloody. Fear made people into something less than human. You are all willing to do this, I asked. Not to Victor, not to Mitchell, to the crowd, to the ordinary men who had somehow convinced themselves this was justice. You are willing to send a child back to being whipped, back to a man who probably murdered her parents, because a piece of paper says it is legal. Nobody answered. Several men looked away, but nobody moved. Victor stepped forward. Enough speeches. Sheriff, do your job or I will have your badge. Mitchell drew his gun, pointed it at me. His hand was shaking. Do not make this harder than it is. I heard movement behind me, turned. Sarah had come out of the back room despite my orders. She stood in the doorway, small and pale, still wearing the dress that used to be Martha's. The bruises on her face had faded to yellow but were still visible. The bandages on her back showed through the thin fabric. She walked past me, stood at the edge of the porch, looked out at the crowd. My name is Sarah Elizabeth Dalton, she said. Her voice was small but steady. My mom and Papa died when their wagon crashed. Uncle Victor says it was an accident. But Papa told me 3 days before he died that Uncle Victor had been threatening him. Told me that if anything happened, I should run to Benjamin Harper because he was the only man we could trust. She pulled at her dress, showing her back, the bandages, the outline of welts underneath. Uncle Victor did this to me with his belt, the one with the 3 horses. He did it because I would not sign papers giving him the ranch. Did it because I asked questions about how Mama and Papa died. Did it because I existed and he wanted me gone? Sarah's voice strengthened. Mr. Harper did not kidnap me. I ran to him. I begged him to help me. And he did, even though it cost him everything. Even though men like you are standing here with guns and torches ready to drag me back to more of the same. She looked directly at Victor. You killed my parents. You beat me. You tried to steal everything they built. And now you are using the law to finish what you started. The crowd shifted, uncomfortable. Several men lowered their torches. One of them, a rancher named Morris, who had known Robert Dalton, stepped forward. Those welts look real, Morris said slowly. And I remember Robert saying something about Victor asking too many questions about his land. Did not think much of it at the time. The girl is lying, Victor said sharply. Children lie when they are scared, when they have been coached by desperate men. Coached, Sarah's voice went hard. You want proof your belt buckle has a scratch on the middle horse right leg. Got it when you threw the belt at me and it hit the wall. That scratch is stamped into my back. Dr. Pierce can testify to that. Victor's face went white, then red. That proves nothing. It proves you hit her hard enough to mark her, Dr. Pierce called from the crowd. He stepped forward, medical bag in hand. I examined those welts. They matched the buckle pattern exactly, including the scratch. This child was beaten systematically, repeatedly, by someone wearing that specific belt. The crowd was turning. I could feel it. The tide shifting from fear to doubt to something that might become outrage if pushed far enough. Victor felt it too. His composure cracked. This is absurd, he said. I am her legal guardian. What I do to discipline her is my business. The law gives me that right. The law also says guardians cannot abuse their wards, Whitmore said. He had ridden back from Colorado Springs exhausted but present. He stepped forward from the crowd, legal documents in hand. The law says evidence of abuse invalidates guardianship, and the law says a properly filed will supersedes emergency guardianship. Petitions filed after death. He held up Robert's will. This document was filed 5 months before the Daltons died, filed legally with the territorial clerk, notarized by me, witnessed by 3 people. It clearly states that Benjamin Harper is to be Sarah's guardian. Your petition was filed 2 weeks after Robert's death. Too late. Robert's wishes were already on record. Filed in secret, Victor snarled. Hidden from the family. That makes it suspicious. Filed secretly because Robert Dalton was afraid of you, Whitmore shot back. Afraid you would do exactly what you did, kill him, and claim guardianship before anyone knew better. He told me everything in my office. How you threatened him, how you wanted his water rights, how you had made similar threats to other ranchers who all ended up dead in convenient accidents. Victor's hand moved toward his coat. My hand moved toward my gun. Do not, Sheriff Mitchell said quietly. His gun was still drawn, but now it was pointed at Victor, not me. I have heard enough. I think we all have. Victor stared at him. You are supposed to be enforcing the court order. I am supposed to be enforcing the law. And I am starting to think the law has been bent pretty far in your direction for a long time now. Mitchell looked at the crowd. How many of you have lost family members in suspicious accidents near Victor's property? How many have been pressured to sell land you did not want to sell? Silence. Then Morris spoke up. My brother died in a barn fire 3 years back, after he refused to sell his water rights to Victor. Fire marshal said it was accidental, but my brother was careful with fire. Real careful. Another voice. A woman. My husband fell off a ladder at the lumber mill, Victor's lumber mill, day after they had an argument about wages. Never made sense to me. More voices. A pattern emerging from years of silence. A dozen deaths. 24 suspicious accidents. All around Victor Ashford's expanding empire. These are lies, Victor said. Slander. All of you are turning on me because this drunk has convinced you with a forged will and a child's stories. Then let us test it, Whitmore said. Let us take this to the territorial governor. Let him review the evidence. If the will is forged, I will face charges. If it is real, Ben keeps guardianship. If Sarah has been beaten, you face charges. If she has not, she goes back to you. Simple, fair, legal. Victor looked around, at the crowd that was no longer his, at the sheriff whose gun was pointed the wrong direction, at me still alive, still defiant, still protecting the one thing standing between Victor and 5,000 acres of prime land. Something in Victor's face changed. The mask dropped completely. What was left was cold and calculating and desperate. "No," he said quietly. "I do not think so." He pulled a gun from his coat. Fast, faster than a man his age should move. Pointed it at Sarah. I moved without thinking. Threw myself forward off the porch between the gun and the girl. Heard the shot. Felt the impact like being kicked by a horse. Hot pain spreading across my left shoulder. Then I was on the ground looking up at the ski, hearing Sarah screaming, hearing boots running, hearing more gunshots, unsure who was firing. Dr. Pierce's face appeared above me. "Do not move. You are hit, shoulder. Missed the artery, but you are bleeding bad." I tried to sit up. Pierce pushed me back down. "Sarah Margaret has her. She is safe. Victor Mitchell shot him, dead before he hit the ground." I closed my eyes, let the relief wash over me along with the pain. It was over. Victor was dead. Sarah was safe. The nightmare had ended. "Am I dying?" Pierce snorted. "You are too stubborn to die, but you will have a hell of a scar." I woke in Dr. Pierce's office, laid out on the examination table with my shoulder wrapped in bandages. Sarah sat beside me, holding my hand, her face tear-stained. "You jumped in front of a bullet," she said. Her voice shook. "You could have died, but I did not. But you could have." I tried to sit up. Pain lanced through my shoulder. I made it halfway before Pierce appeared and pushed me back down. "Rest. You lost blood. Your body needs time." How long was I out? 6 hours. It is morning now. Pierce explained what had happened. Victor was dead. Mitchell had fired 2 shots into his chest. Judge Miller had tried to run, but Mitchell caught him. Now Miller was in custody facing charges of corruption. 3 of Victor's men had been arrested. Threatened with murder conspiracy, they were eager to testify about Victor's other crimes to save their own necks. One admitted to loosening the wheel bolt on Robert's wagon. Another admitted to setting the Harrison barn fire. The evidence was mounting. "Where is Sarah safe?" "Margaret is with her." The door opened. Whitmore entered carrying a telegram. His hands were shaking. "From the territorial governor's office," he said. He read it aloud. "After emergency review, the territorial court rules 1. Robert Dalton's will dated April 12, 1883, is legal and valid. 2. Benjamin Harper is the lawful guardian of Sarah Elizabeth Dalton. 3. Judge Miller's guardianship decision is void due to corruption. 4. The Dalton Ranch is held in trust for Sarah until age 18. 5. Judge Miller is indicted for corruption and obstruction of justice. Signed Governor Frederick Pitkin." "We won," Whitmore said. "Legally, officially, completely." Sarah burst into tears, not from sadness, from relief so overwhelming it broke through every wall she had built. I could not speak. My throat had closed up. "There is more," Pierce said quietly. "Victor's estate." The bank uncovered records of all the debts he held. 47 people, farmers, craftsmen, small business owners, all owing Victor money, including you, Whitmore added. "Your $200. A judge in Colorado Springs ruled that since Victor acquired many of these debts through fraudulent means, lending money during times of hardship after mysterious accidents, all debts are canceled. You are free, Ben. The house is yours." I still could not speak. Just lay there overwhelmed. "The town wants to apologize," Margaret said from the doorway. "People are ashamed. They want to make it right. Tell them I do not need apologies. Tell them to be braver next time." 2 weeks later, Sarah and I moved to the Dalton Ranch. The house was exactly as Robert and Catherine had left it. Clothes still in closets, dishes still in cabinets. Pictures on the walls of a family that no longer existed except in memory, and in the girl who had Robert's stubborn determination and Catherine's fierce intelligence. We spent the first week just cleaning, making the house livable again, airing out rooms that had been closed too long, opening windows, letting light in. Sarah helped with everything, not because she had to, because she wanted to reclaim this space. I hired ranch hands, good men recommended by Morris and the others who had stood with us. Started rebuilding the herd, repaired fences, fixed the barn, did all the work that Robert would have done if he had lived. Sarah learned. Margaret taught her to cook. Whitmore taught her bookkeeping and law. I taught her to ride to shoot, to manage the ranch. All the skills her father would have taught if he had the chance. At night, we sat on the porch and watched the sunset over the valley, the same valley Robert and Catherine had looked at, the same mountains, the same sky. Tell me about them, Sarah would say, about Mama and Papa, and I would tell her everything I remembered. Robert's laugh, Catherine's kindness, the way they had looked at each other like the rest of the world did not exist, the way they had built this ranch from nothing into something worth dying for. They loved you very much, I always finished. Everything they did was for you. I know Sarah would say. That is why I have to make it count. 6 months after Victor died, I stood before 3 graves on the hill above Copper Ridge. Martha Harper, Daniel Harper, and next to them a space I had always assumed would be mine. I did not come here often. It hurt too much. But today felt important somehow, like an ending and a beginning happening at the same time. I kept my promise, I said to the graves. To Martha, to Daniel, to the family I had failed to save. I saved a child. I stood up when it mattered. I became someone you could be proud of again. The wind whispered through the grass. Birds sang in the trees. The sun warmed my face. I knelt down, touched Martha's headstone gently. I will always love you, both of you. But I am learning to live again, learning that surviving is not the same as living. You would want that for me. I know you would. I stood, looked back toward the valley where the Dalton Ranch sat, where Sarah was probably working on her schoolwork under Margaret's watchful eye, where dinner would be waiting when I got home. Home, I had a home again, a family again, a reason to wake up in the morning again. It looked different than it had before, but maybe that was okay. Maybe second chances were supposed to look different. Maybe that was the whole point. Sarah appeared beside me. She had followed me quietly. They would like you, I think she said. Why do you think that? Because they loved Papa, and Papa loved you, so they have that in common. I knelt down to her eye level. You know you do not replace Daniel, right? You do not have to try to become him. I know, and you do not replace Papa, but we can be a new family, built from loss, but still family. We planted an oak tree next to the 3 graves, a small sapling that would grow as Sarah grew. This tree will be tall when you are old, I said, 50 feet maybe, and people will remember. Martha, Daniel, Robert, Catherine. They will not be forgotten. And someday when I have children, I will bring them here, Sarah said. I will tell them about the old blacksmith who saved me. I laughed. Old? I am only 56. Sarah laughed too. The sound like bells, the first time I had heard her laugh, truly. December 1884. Exactly 1 year since Sarah knocked on my door. We stood on the porch of the Dalton Ranch, snow falling again, but this time I was not alone. We held a dinner. Margaret cooked. Dr. Pierce brought wine. Whitmore brought the official adoption papers. Sarah was legally mine now. Sheriff Mitchell came. Morris came with his family. Samuel Chen, who now managed the ranch. Pastor Stone. All the people who had stood with us. I stood up to speak. 1 year ago, I was a dead man walking. I did not care about anything. Did not believe in anything. Then a little girl knocked on my door, and she did not just ask me to save her. She saved me. But not just Sarah. All of you. Margaret, you stood guard with a shotgun. Pierce, you stood up with medicine. Whitmore, you came back after fear. Mitchell, you chose right over easy. Morris, Chen, Stone, all of you were the first to stand when it was dangerous. Robert Dalton told me once that a good man is not someone who never falls. He is someone who stands up after falling. I fell for 8 years. You helped me stand up. Thank you. Sarah stood up, unexpected. When Papa died, he told me to find Benjamin Harper. I asked who he was. Papa said the man who knows how to keep promises even when they hurt. I did not understand then, but now I do. Mr. Harper promised Papa he would protect me. He could have walked away. I was not his child. He owed me nothing, but he did not walk away. He jumped in front of a bullet. He lost his house, his money, almost got arrested, all for a promise to a dead man. So I want to make a promise. When I am 18, when I inherit this ranch, I will rename it. Not Dalton Ranch anymore, Harper Dalton Ranch. Because family is not just about blood. Sometimes it is about choice. The room was silent. I had tears in my eyes. Sarah hugged me. The whole room applauded. After dinner, we hung a horseshoe above the main door. We had forged it together. Sarah holding the tongs, me striking the hammer, carved below it, built on promise, kept by love. Harper Dalton Ranch, established 1884. Now let me bring you back to where we began, December 1891. I am 63 years old, sitting on this porch with the young teacher from Colorado Springs. Sarah is 17 now. In 4 months, she will be 18. She already runs half the ranch. We have 500 cattle, 12 employees, 7,000 acres, $8,000 income per year. The teacher asks what I will do when Sarah inherits. I will do what I always do. Advise when asked, stay quiet when not. Sarah overhears. I can make my own mistakes, thank you. I laugh. That is my daughter. The teacher asks what advice I would give people struggling like I was. Pain does not define you. How you respond to it does. I lost 8 years learning that. Do not lose 8 years. If you have fallen from drink or grief or guilt, do not stay down. Find someone to help. Find a purpose bigger than yourself. For me, it was a little girl knocking on my door. For you, it might be something else. But it is out there. You just need to be sober enough to see it. The teacher leaves. Sarah and I sit on the porch watching the sunset. Do you think Papa would be proud? Sarah asks. I think he knew this would happen. That is why he chose us. Sarah leans her head on my shoulder. I look toward the 3 graves on the hill. I think Martha, Daniel, Robert, Catherine. You are gone. But you left promises. Promises to protect, to love, to never give up. I kept my promise. Now Sarah will keep hers. That is how people become immortal. Through promises kept across generations. Sarah asks what I am thinking. That I am the luckiest man in the world. Because I died once, and I got a second chance to live. Not many people get that. 4 months until Sarah turns 18. Until she opens Robert's sealed letter. We sit in comfortable silence. Finally, Sarah speaks. Tell me again about the mine. So I tell her, for the 20th time, the story of how courage runs in families through choice. When it ends, Sarah yawns. I am going to bed. Sleep well. She pauses. Mr. Harper, yes. I am glad you opened the door that night. So am I, little one. So am I. She goes inside. I stay outside looking at the stars. I am doing my best, I say to the night. It is not perfect, but it is real, and it is enough. I go inside, check the locks, bank the fire, the tasks of a man who has something worth protecting. Before bed, I look south toward the 3 graves. I am sorry I could not save you, but I saved her. I saved Sarah. That has to count for something. Inside my chest, where guilt had lived for 8 years, something close to peace grows. I was broken. I was lost. But tonight I am a father again, a man who kept his word when keeping it cost everything. Tomorrow we will wake and work and build. For as long as breath remains, I close the window. Go to bed in a house that feels like home. The last promise has been kept. I am ready.